Each of us knows that feeling when the life you've been building for years crumbles to pieces in an instant, when you're standing in the middle of ruins and you don't know where to go next. But what if at this very moment, in the pitch darkness, someone gives you a helping hand? And what if you find the strength to accept it? This story is about pain, betrayal, and the fact that even the most terrible losses can be the beginning of a new life. The collapse of a 20-year marriage happened in an instant. Brianna, I told you not to call today. Olivia heard her husband's voice in the middle of celebrating her own anniversary. At the age of 40, she learned the bitter truth. Her husband had an affair with his young assistant. Now fate is preparing a surprise for her cheating ex-husband. The crystal glasses reflected the soft glow of the candles. Olivia took one last look at the set table, straightened the snow-white linen tablecloth, and took a step back, admiring the fruits of her many hours of work. 39 years is not a round date, but 20 years of living together is a reason for a special celebration. Perfect, she whispered, adjusting the cutlery. The aroma of baked turkey with cranberries wafted from the kitchen, her signature dish, the recipe of which she learned from her mother-in-law in the first year of marriage. Back then, she had tried desperately to match Brian's vision of an ideal wife. Today, these efforts have become part of her nature. The apartment was filled with the warm light of the setting sun. Large windows overlooking Maple Park let in golden rays that glided across the parquet, laid by Brian himself. Olivia couldn't help but smile, remembering how they moved in here 5 years ago. This apartment has become a symbol of their success. Spacious 3-bedroom apartment in a new condominium overlooking the park. They saved up for it for many years, denying themselves a lot. Brian took on any part-time job. She saved on everything, even when his business was booming. They were once a single entity, a team with one goal. How the students lived, Olivia grinned, running her hand over the solid maple bookshelf. Dust didn't dare linger in her immaculate home. The doorbell interrupted the flow of memories. Olivia adjusted the emerald dress that accentuated her slender figure, shook out her brown hair, and went to open the door. "Olivia, you're beautiful." Emily, her best friend since college, held out a huge bouquet of orchids and a box of cake. "Happy birthday, darling." Other guests followed. Brian's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Warren, her brother and his wife, and Brian's colleagues. Olivia greeted everyone warmly, accepted gifts, and made jokes. Only one question kept popping up in her head. Where's Brian? He promised to be back by 6. It was almost 7 o'clock now. The phone was silent. Olivia nervously glanced at her watch, keeping up a conversation with her husband's parents. When she finally heard the sound of the door opening in the hallway, she felt the tension release her. Brian entered the living room, tall, trim, and immaculately dressed. Piercing gray eyes, a confident smile, gray hair on his temples giving him a special charm. He always knew how to make an impression. "I'm sorry I'm late," he announced from the doorway, kissing Olivia on the cheek. He smelled of expensive cologne and something else she couldn't identify. Traffic jams in the center. It's a real hell. Dinner went on as usual. Brian, as always shown, talked about new projects of his construction company, Great Lake Construction, joked, filled glasses. No one except Olivia seemed to notice how often he left the table, saying a short need to answer the phone. After the third such disappearance, Emily looked pointedly at Olivia, but she just shrugged her shoulders. Her intuition told her that something was wrong, but she pushed the disturbing thoughts away. Brian has always been a workaholic, she thought as she cut the cake. Even at 42, he remains as ambitious as he was at 20. When Brian left the table again, Olivia decided to find him. The guests enthusiastically discussed the latest Wall Street news. No one noticed her absence. She walked down the hallway, intuitively heading for the bathroom. The door was slightly ajar, and her husband's muffled voice could be heard from behind it. "Brianna, I can't talk right now. I have company." Brian's whisper sounded gentle, intimate. "Yes, I miss you too. I promise tomorrow, at the same time in the same place. And I love you, baby." Olivia froze, afraid to move. The air became thick, viscous, as if all the oxygen had disappeared from her lungs at once. She leaned against the wall, trying to process what she had heard. "Brianna, baby, I miss you." The simple words hit her like an avalanche, knocking the ground out from under her feet. The bathroom door swung open, and Brian froze on the threshold, seeing his wife. The second of heavy silence when their eyes met seemed like an eternity. "Olivia," he began hesitantly, but she had already turned and was walking briskly back to the guests. "Is everything okay?" Emily noticed the changes in her friend's face. "Yes, of course." Olivia smiled tightly as she refilled the guests' glasses. "Who needs more cake?" She moved mechanically, like a wound-up doll, smiled, kept up a conversation, offered supplements. And inside there is emptiness and ringing silence, interrupted by one thought. He has another one. A lot of things make sense now. Late return, detachment, loss of interest in their intimate life. For the past 6 months, she had been convincing herself that this was temporary, that he was just having a difficult time in business. How naive. Brian returned to the table, behaving as if nothing had happened. Their gazes sometimes crossed, and she saw in his eyes a mixture of guilt and some strange relief, as if he was glad that he no longer had to pretend. "Let's drink to our beautiful hostess," Mr. Warren proclaimed, raising his glass. "To Olivia and to the 20 years of happy marriage of our children." Everyone supported the toast. The crystal clink of the glasses sounded like a death knell in Olivia's ears. 20 years of marriage. 20 years crossed out by one phone conversation. When the guests began to say goodbye, it was already past midnight. Olivia stood at the door, accepting compliments for a wonderful evening. Every "you are such a happy couple" was filled with bitter irony. She didn't know what she would do when she was alone with her husband, but she knew for sure that nothing would ever be the same again. Closing the door behind the last of the guests, she turned to Brian, who was frozen in the middle of the living room. There was a wariness in his eyes, like an animal ready to either escape or attack. "Who is Brianna?" Olivia asked in an unexpectedly calm voice. Brian froze for a moment, then slowly sank into a chair. His hand automatically reached for his tie, loosening the knot, as if he suddenly found it difficult to breathe. "It's not what you think," he began the familiar phrase from cheap soap operas. "What do I think, Brian?" Olivia crossed her arms over her chest, not taking her eyes off her husband. "That you're having an affair? That you've been lying to me for months? That you looked into my eyes and talked about love, and you whispered the same words to another woman?" He got up, went to the bar, poured himself a whiskey. "An expensive single malt, a gift from our partners on my last birthday." "Sit down, let's talk like adults," he said in the business-like tone he usually used to negotiate. "Brianna." "Yes, we have a relationship. But that doesn't mean anything, you know? It's just physiology." Olivia clenched her fists so that her nails dug into her palms. "Physiology? What is it?" she asked. 20 years of marriage, 2 children. This is life. And your affair? Is it just physiology? Brian took a sip of whiskey and looked out the window at the sparse lights of Manhattan at night. "Listen, all men go through this," he began wearily. "Ask your father, ask your brother. It doesn't change anything. We just have different needs. You know my father. He was faithful to his mother all his life, but in a way..." Olivia laughed bitterly. "So it's hereditary? Should I, like your mother, silently swallow my grievances and pretend that everything is fine?" For a second, irritation flashed in his eyes, which he immediately hid behind a mask of remorse. "Olivia, I'm sorry, I was an idiot. It won't happen again, I promise." He took a step towards her, but she stepped back. "You're right, it won't happen again, because I'm filing for divorce." His face fell and his eyebrows shot up. Then his mouth twisted into a condescending grin. "Livy, don't be dramatic. You're feeling emotional right now. I understand everything will look different in the morning." Olivia turned around and went into the bedroom. Every step was difficult. I wanted to turn around, scream, smash something. Instead, she silently took a pillow and a blanket out of the closet and threw them on the sofa in the living room. "We'll talk there in the morning," she said, closing the bedroom door behind her. Left alone, Olivia sat down on the edge of the bed. The room seemed to spin before my eyes. 20 years. She gave this man 20 years of her life. They first met in the summer of 1995 at the Starlight Diner University Cafe. A noisy group was celebrating the end of the semester. 17-year-old Olivia, who had just enrolled in the Faculty of Architecture, felt awkward among the undergraduates. He entered the cafe with a friend, tall, tanned, and wearing a faded camouflage shirt that accentuated his sturdy shoulders. All the girls at the table fell silent, watching him go. "Who is this?" Olivia whispered to her friend. "James Stone is back from the army. They say he fought in Iraq," she replied breathlessly. Why did he choose her out of all the girls? Was the question Olivia asked herself more than once later. Maybe because of her spontaneity. She didn't know how to flirt at all. She blushed from every glance he gave her. Or maybe because of her drawings. She was sketching a portrait of her friend on a napkin when he sat down at their table. The evening ended with an awkward moment at the entrance. James bent down to kiss her, but she pulled away. "I'm only 17. It's still early," Olivia replied. He laughed, but wasn't offended, just took her number, and a couple of days later, he left for Los Angeles to work. The turbulent 90s left no choice. To survive, I had to spin. They met again 3 years later. Olivia was walking down the hallway of the university when she heard a familiar voice, and I was wondering where to meet the girl who turned me down. He entered the Faculty of Economics, worked part-time at 3 jobs, and lived in a dormitory. After serving in Iraq, James appreciated a peaceful life and made plans for the future. Now, she was already 20, he was 23, and there were no obstacles left for kissing. The wedding took place a year later, modestly, with money that they raised themselves. My parents helped me as much as they could, but times were hard. We lived in a one-room apartment in an old house, counting every cent. But when Olivia became pregnant with Sophia, James became extremely active, got a job at a construction company, worked 7 days a week, and studied at the same time. When my daughter turned 2, they were able to rent a 2-bedroom apartment. Sophia was born red-haired and loud, but with an angelic smile. Kirk appeared a little over a year later, calm, with attentive dark eyes. Olivia remembered how James held his son in the hospital, clumsily wrapping him in a blanket, the huge hands of a construction worker, and a tiny bundle with a man. "Now I have everything," he said then, hugging them both to himself. In those years, he worked hard, but he always found time for his family. He read fairy tales to the children in the evenings and took them to the park on weekends, even if he was exhausted. When Sophia fell ill with pneumonia, he did not leave her bedside, wiped her with cold water, told stories to distract from the high fever. The difficulties only brought them closer. Lack of money, a cramped apartment, children's illnesses, quarrels with neighbors, we overcame everything together. When Olivia was offered a job at an architectural firm, James took care of the children, even though he was already starting his own business. There was a soft knock on the bedroom door, snapping Olivia out of her reverie. "May I?" James sounded guilty. She didn't answer. After a few seconds, the footsteps retreated towards the living room. Olivia went to the dressing table and looked at her reflection. In the mirror, she saw a tired woman with reddened eyes. James used to say that she was the most beautiful person in the world, and now he's having fun with someone named Brianna. The phone on the bedside table rang. "Emily, are you okay?" the friend asked without preface. "How do you know that?" "I saw your face when you came back to the table, and his was like a beaten dog. It doesn't take a genius to put 2 and 2 together." Olivia exhaled. There was no need to pretend with Emily. "He's cheating on me," she said aloud, a phrase that had only existed in her mind until now. "I said I'm filing for divorce." "Take your time," Emily's voice became serious. "You're angry now, and you're doing the right thing. But the decision on divorce should not be made in a state of passion. And in what condition should I take it? After the 20th betrayal. There was a sigh on the line. I'm not saying that you should forgive him. I'm saying that you need to cool down first. Think about everything, including the practical side. Where will you live? For what? The condo is registered to both of you. Olivia broke off. She had never asked herself such questions before. You deserve respect and happiness, Emily continued. And if that requires a divorce, I'll support you. But don't cut it off the shoulder. Talk to him in the morning when the emotions settle down a bit. After the conversation, Olivia sat for a long time, staring at one point. She recalled how James had changed when his Lakewood development construction business took off. At first, it was the little things: expensive suits, a new car, membership in the Canyon Ridge Private Club. Then business trips became more frequent and longer. Strange calls that he answered while walking away. A new cologne that she hadn't bought. How long ago did it start? A year ago? 2 years ago? She missed the moment when her husband became a stranger. I remembered the scene from 4 years ago, the Lakewood Development Corporate, the young secretary Chloe, hovering around James. It seemed to you, he said then to her question, and she believed, convinced herself that it was all her hypocrisy. She believed him over and over again, turning a blind eye to the obvious. Olivia went to the window. The city was falling asleep. There were few lanterns in the park. Fear washed over her like a wave. How will she live on? What will he tell the children? What will she do at the age of 39 if she has been a wife and mother all her adult life? The phone rang again. This time it was Sophia. "Mom, happy birthday." Her daughter's joyful voice made her heart sink. "I'm sorry I couldn't come. The exams were completely flunked. How was the celebration?" "Great, honey," Olivia lied, trying to sound cheerful. "Everything was great." The morning after the exposure turned out to be dank and gray. Olivia stood at the window, watching the fine rain cover the city with a veil of fog. Yesterday's conversation with James ended in nothing. He tried to convince her again that cheating meant nothing, and divorce was too drastic a decision. "Sophia and Kirk are coming for the holidays in 2 weeks," she said when James appeared in the kitchen with his hair wet after a shower. "I suggest we don't tell them anything until they arrive." He nodded, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "That's reasonable. They don't need any extra stress before exams right now." James looked almost calm, as if yesterday's quarrel was a minor misunderstanding. This calmness stung more than any words. "But I haven't changed my mind," she added firmly. "I'm filing for divorce." He looked up at her. "Don't say something you'll regret later." There was no threat in that phrase, but rather the self-confidence of a man accustomed to controlling everything. The office of the law firm Price and McKinley was located in an old mansion on St. James Avenue. Olivia adjusted her scarf and pushed open the heavy door. The family law lawyer, Miss Karen Miller, turned out to be a stocky woman with shrewd eyes and a practical approach. The apartment is jointly owned. The car is registered to her husband. The bills are also on him, the lawyer listed, making notes in a notebook. And the business? Olivia site. Lakewood Development Construction Company is entirely his. "I've never been officially employed, even though you've been designing interiors for his projects?" Miss Miller asked. "Yes, but all the orders went through his company. On paper, I'm the housewife he's been providing for 20 years. The lawyer looked at her with sympathy. "I'm not going to get your hopes up, Mrs. Stone. By law, you are entitled to half of the jointly acquired property, but it will be difficult to actually prove your participation in your husband's business. Be prepared for the fact that he may act in bad faith." After leaving the office, Olivia felt a strange mixture of fear and freedom. "We have been building a common house for 20 years, and now we will have to divide its fragments." The phone rang. "Emily, are you free? I've booked a table at Poseidon Grill for 7. Objections are not accepted." The Poseidon Grill restaurant was considered one of the best in the city. A bright room with a view of the Hudson River. Impeccable service. Emily was already waiting at the table, elegant in a gray business suit. "I talked to our lawyer," she said after exchanging greetings. "If James starts withdrawing assets, we can challenge that." Emily worked as a finance director for a large company, Cornell Finance, and had extensive connections. Thanks. Olivia broke off a piece of bread. But I'm afraid he's already preparing for defense. I happened to see his statements today. Transfers money to some new accounts. Bastard, Emily shook her head. How are the kids? They don't know yet. We agreed not to talk until they arrive. They were discussing a divorce strategy when a waiter approached their table with a bottle of wine. Ladies, let me get you a drink from the gentleman at that table. He pointed at the tall man sitting by the window. He nodded slightly at them, raising his glass. Matthew White, Emily whispered. The famous architect, a widower, is raising his daughter alone. Olivia vaguely recalled something about a talented architect who lost his wife in childbirth. I don't accept such gifts, she began, but Emily had already waved her hand at the man, inviting him to join her. I apologize for taking the liberty, he said, approaching. It's just that Emily and I have known each other for a long time from work, and I thought... Sit down, Matthew. Emily pointed to an empty seat. Meet Olivia, my best friend, a talented interior designer. Olivia looked at the man carefully. Tall, with a neat gray-streaked beard, calm brown eyes, wrinkles at the corners. He is dressed simply, but with taste. Blue jumper, white shirt, dark jeans. Nothing to do with James' polished polish. Matthew White. He introduced himself, holding out his hand. The handshake was firm, but not overbearing. Emily immediately excused herself and went to answer an important call, leaving them alone. A blatant attempt to bring us together, Matthew remarked with a slight smile. I'm sorry if I bothered you. It's okay. That's nice of you, Olivia replied awkwardly, sipping her wine. The conversation didn't go well at first. He asked her what she was working on. She muttered something about projects for private clients. Then he mentioned the new museum of modern art he was designing, and Olivia perked up. It turned out that she was following this construction with professional interest. These transition lines between the halls are an ingenious solution, she said. It creates a feeling of space flowing. Matthew's eyes lit up. Did you notice? Most people only see the exterior facade. When Emily returned, they enthusiastically discussed modern approaches to the organization of living space. I think the importance of natural light is underestimated in the United States, Matthew said. We live in a country where there is not enough sun. I totally agree. I had a project where I convinced the customer to make panoramic windows instead of standard ones, and it completely transformed the premises. Time flew by unnoticed. It was already dark when they left the restaurant. Matthew volunteered to walk them to their car. We have an exhibition of modern architecture opening next week, he said, handing Olivia a business card. I would like to invite you. It will be interesting to hear the opinion of a professional. She took the card, not knowing what to say. Part of her wanted to agree. Another recalled a broken marriage and the wrong time for new acquaintances. I'll think about it, she finally replied. Thank you for the invitation. There was a surprise waiting for Olivia at home. A huge bouquet of scarlet roses and a box of jewelry. James was sitting in an armchair with a glass of whiskey, waiting for her reaction. What is it? What is it? She asked, not hiding her surprise. My way of saying I'm sorry. He came over and put his arm around her shoulders. I was an idiot, Olivia. I realized everything. You are the most precious thing I have. Inside the box was an elegant diamond bracelet. James took her hand and fastened the clasp. It suits you. Save it for our dinner at the Copper Kettle tomorrow. I've booked a table for 8. Olivia pulled her hand free. Do you think you can buy forgiveness? No way. His face became serious. I think we can start all over again. I ended my relationship with Brianna. It was a moment of weakness that won't happen again. He spoke beautifully, convincingly. As always, Olivia suddenly found herself not believing a single word he was saying. I need to think about it, she said, backing away. I'm tired. Later, lying in bed, she reread the messages from the children. Sophia sent photos from the university design competition where she took second place. Kirk, his sketches for a school biology project. They were so much like her in their youth, creatively engaged. The thought that her decision would destroy their idea of family tormented their soul. The phone flashed a new message, an unknown number. I hope the offer is still valid. The exhibition is on Thursday at 1800 hours. I will be glad to see you. Matthew. Olivia stared at the screen for a long time, then slowly typed, "Thank you for the invitation. I'll be there." In the following days, James behaved like an exemplary husband, cooked breakfast, asked about her plans, even suggested a joint vacation in Italy. But Olivia noticed the falsity in his concern. Not sincerity, but strategy. He acted as if she had already forgiven him, as if the decision to divorce was a temporary, feminine whim. "I've noticed you've been different lately," he said over dinner. "Did something happen besides the fact that I found out about your cheating?" Olivia asked calmly. He grimaced. "I thought we were moving on." "Because I'm really moving on, James. But not with you." His face changed and his eyes narrowed. "Did you meet someone so quickly?" "No way." She shook her head. "I met myself. A woman who wants something more than to be a decorative attachment to a successful husband." James stood up abruptly. "So that's the thing. Have you decided that you can do it without me?" He chuckled. "And where are you going? How will you pay for the condo, for the car, for the education of the children?" "That's it," Olivia said softly. "Have you always perceived me as a kept woman?" "Yes, I am a realist," he snapped. "Are you talented?" "I'm not arguing, but that's not enough in the real world. They need connections, money, and influence. Everything that I provided for you." She silently got up from the table and left the room, closing the door firmly behind her. On Thursday, Olivia wore her best dress, a dark blue one, austere but elegant. I added a minimum of makeup and styled my hair in a simple hairstyle. I looked at myself in the mirror. There was no trace of yesterday's tears. She hesitated before going out. "Maybe you shouldn't? Isn't it too early for new acquaintances?" But I could still see James's face, his condescending grin. "Where are you going? How will you pay?" Resolutely, picking up her purse, Olivia headed for the door. After all, this is just an exhibition, a professional event, nothing more. Penn Station was buzzing like a beehive. Olivia stared intently at the crowd of passengers disembarking from the platform. There seemed to be an invisible wall between her and James, who was standing 2 steps away. They hadn't spoken much since the night he'd tried to bully her into financial dependence. Now, for the first time in 2 weeks, they were together, united by a common goal, to meet children. "Mom. Dad." Sophia's voice cut through the noise of the train station. They appeared at the same time. Sophia, tall, with her father's gray eyes and her mother's brown hair. And Kirk, almost a man now, with serious eyes and sun-bleached bangs. James rushed to hug his daughter, twirling her in the air, as in childhood. Kirk gave his mother a restrained hug, whispering in her ear, "You look tired. Is everything okay?" Olivia squeezed her son's hand. "It's okay now." They talked excitedly in the taxi. Sophia talked excitedly about her university projects. Kirk about the preparation for admission and the new swimming coach. James behaved with exaggerated cheerfulness, kept up the conversation, and touched Olivia's hand every now and then, creating the illusion of intimacy. She didn't pull away. She didn't want to spoil the children's homecoming. "Surprise," James announced as they went up to the apartment. "I invited the Wilsons to dinner. Do you remember Uncle Tom and Aunt Nancy? They wanted to see so much." Olivia shot him a surprised look. There was no question of a family dinner, but James was already involving the children in the preparations. "Sophie, can you help with the serving?" "Kirk, let's sort things out together." The Wilsons are longtime family friends, a respectable couple in their 50s. The contrast of their settled, stable family life with the stones-bursting marriage hurt Olivia's heart as she helped Sophia set the plates. "You're different, Mom," the daughter suddenly noticed, studying her mother. "I've lost weight, and I don't know. I've become more collected or something." Olivia straightened the tablecloth. I just took care of myself. A new diet, daily runs. Sophia chuckled. And this is after saying all my life that dieting is evil. Mother and daughter exchanged understanding smiles. At 19, Sophia was more observant than she would have liked. The dinner turned into a one-man show. James played the role of the perfect family man, telling funny stories from their past together, pouring Olivia wine, imperceptibly pushing a dish towards her. Try it, you'll like it. The Wilsons blossomed with emotion, watching the exemplary family. Only Kirk was frowning, looking from his father to his mother. When dessert was served, James' phone rang. He looked at the screen and frowned. I'm sorry, I have to answer that. A work issue. He went out into the corridor, but in the sudden silence his voice could be clearly heard in the dining room. Brianna, I told you not to call today. No, I can't talk right now. Stop being hysterical, my kids have arrived. Sophia's face froze. Kirk slowly put down his fork. His fingers were white with tension. The Wilsons exchanged awkward glances. Olivia sat motionless, feeling a burning shame mingle with anger. James returned with a tight smile. I'm sorry, my colleague didn't sort out the documents. Colleague Brianna? Kirk asked quietly. There was a heavy silence in the dining room. The Wilsons shifted in their chairs. I think we should go, Tom muttered, getting up. Sophie, Kirk, it was nice to see you. After they left, the silence became unbearable. Sophia sat with her head down, fiddling with her napkin. It's not what you think, James began. What should we think? Kirk stood up, clenching his fists. What? Some Brianna calls you in the evening and you run out to talk to her? Don't raise your voice at your father, James admonished him. Don't lie to your mother, Kirk shouted. Do you think we're blind? I've seen you talking to your mom like you're doing a favor. But really? Kirk, please. Olivia put her hand on her son's shoulder. Don't. Sophia suddenly burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Sophie, my girl. James tried to hug his daughter, but she recoiled. Don't touch me, she whispered through her tears. Just don't. Olivia hugged her daughter, feeling her tremble. I'm sorry, she whispered. We didn't want you to find out like that. So it's true? Sophia raised her tear-stained face. Is Daddy cheating on you? James paled. Sophia, everything is more complicated than it seems. Adult life is not black and white. Exactly like that. Kirk interrupted him. Either you're loyal to your family or you're not. It's simple. The pain in the young man's eyes was not that of a child, but of a young man whose ideas of honor and dignity collided with an unsightly reality. I need to breathe. James headed for the door. When I get back, we'll talk quietly. I'll explain everything, I promise. The door slammed shut. The three of them were left, a mother and two confused children. How long has it been since it started? Sophie asked, wiping away her tears. Olivia sighed. I found out on my birthday. I heard him talking to this woman. And now what? Kirk sat down in the chair next to his mother. Yes, she replied simply. I've already consulted with a lawyer. The children exchanged glances. In their eyes, Olivia saw not only pain, but also some kind of relief, as if confirming their worst suspicions was better than not knowing. So we guessed correctly, Sophia said softly. Last year, when we visited, it was as if a wall had grown between you. You didn't talk much. We were hoping it was just a crisis, Kirk added. Olivia looked at the children in surprise. They saw everything. They understood everything. They just didn't want to believe it. I'm sorry about what happened, she said, hugging them both. You are the most important thing in my life. And no matter what happens between your father and me, it won't affect our love for you in any way. They talked late into the night. Sophia talked about her boyfriend, Dan, whom she has been dating for a year. I check his phone all the time. He's angry, and I can't help myself. Now I understand why. It's not fair to him, Olivia said softly. Don't transfer our problems to your relationship." Kirk admitted that he had doubted his father for a long time. "Do you remember last year when we came for Christmas? I saw Dad hugging some blonde at a corporate party. I thought it was just my imagination." James returned in the early morning when everyone had already gone to their rooms. Olivia heard him quietly go into the guest bedroom, where he had been sleeping lately. The exhibition of modern architecture at the Georgetown Gallery turned out to be exactly what Olivia needed: a different world, free from family drama. Matthew met her at the entrance in a simple black sweater and jeans, looking both serious and a little boyishly excited. "I'm glad you came," he said, shaking her hand. They walked slowly along the stands with models and drawings, discussing current trends in architecture. Matthew turned out to be not only a talented professional, but also an excellent conversationalist. He listened attentively, asked precise questions, and did not interrupt. During the 2 hours of the exhibition, Olivia never once thought about her domestic problems. "Amazing, isn't it?" Matthew remarked as they stopped in front of a mock up of an eco-friendly apartment complex. "How architecture can change not only space, but also people's lives." "That's why I chose the design," Olivia nodded. "Create an environment where people feel good. It's almost magic." After the exhibition, he offered to have coffee in a small cafe nearby. Olivia noticed how awkwardly he invited her, as if he had forgotten how to do it. At a table in the corner of the cafe, Matthew talked about himself. His wife Mary died 8 years ago in childbirth, leaving him with a newborn Allison in his arms. "I don't remember the first year at all," he confessed, twirling the cup in his hands. "If it wasn't for Grandma Irene, I don't know what would have happened to us." "Yours or hers?" asked Olivia. "Grandma Mary," he smiled. "But I've been just a grandmother for a long time. She moved in with us, helped with Allison. Now he lives in our country house. She says it's hard for her to breathe in the city." "How old is Allison now?" 8. She's in the 2nd grade, plays the piano, and loves cats." There was tenderness in his voice. "I wish Mary could see her." "She would be proud of both of you," Olivia said softly. He nodded gratefully. An old pain flashed in his eyes. Not a fresh wound, but a scar that would always be with him. "I would like to invite you to join us," Matthew suddenly said, "to our country house. Allison is hosting a mini concert for me and Grandma this weekend, and it's really beautiful there. The forest, the lake nearby, the air is completely different." Olivia felt her cheeks flush. Too fast, she thought. Too soon. "Don't think anything of it," he quickly added, noticing her confusion. "Just as friends. Besides, Irene will be glad to meet a new person." At her age, new acquaintances are worth their weight in gold. Olivia hesitated. On the one hand, the idea of spending a day away from the stress of home seemed tempting. On the other hand, she was still married, albeit on the verge of divorce. "My kids are here for the weekend," she began. "Take them with you," Matthew suggested. "Allison will be happy to have her peers. They're 19 and 17, Olivia smiled. "Oh." He looked confused. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." They finished their coffee in companionable silence. When it was time to say goodbye, Matthew didn't insist on his invitation, just said, "The offer remains valid. If you want to escape from the hustle and bustle of the city, let me know." The atmosphere at home remained tense. James tried to talk to the children, but Sophia avoided him, and Kirk answered in monosyllables. On Sunday evening, when it was time to return to the university, Sophia hugged her mother tightly. "Be strong, Mom, and don't let him manipulate you. Kirk promised to come back next weekend. Call me if you need anything. I'm always on your side." After seeing the children off, Olivia was left in an empty apartment. The phone beeped with a message from Matthew. "How was your weekend with the kids?" She hesitated, then typed in the answer. "It's not easy, but we finally talked straight. If you want to get some air, the offer of a country trip is still relevant, without any obligations." Olivia looked at the picture of the children on the wall. Smiling, they stood against the background of the ocean. A picture from 3 years ago, the last family vacation when they were still really happy, or so it seemed to her. I think I'll accept your invitation, she wrote. When can I come? The train beat a steady rhythm on the rails, taking Olivia further and further away from the city. Country villages, woodlands, fields with snow that had not yet melted floated by outside the window. Spring was just coming into its own, timid, indecisive, as if fearing the return of the cold weather. Olivia stared at her reflection in the foggy glass. An unknown woman with a determined look stared back at her. What am I doing? She asked herself over and over again, but an inner voice answered what she should have done a long time ago. You're living your life. Matthew met her at a small train station in a battered Ford Focus. Sorry about the taxi service, he smiled, opening the door. Everything is rustic here. The road wound between hills, went into the forest, went down to the river. Olivia surreptitiously studied Matthew's profile, which was focused, with a barely noticeable crease between the eyebrows. His hands were steady on the steering wheel, the hands of a man accustomed to create and build. Are you nervous? What is it? He asked, without taking his eyes off the road. A little, she admitted. I haven't been to new places for a long time. Allison is worried too. He smiled out of the corner of his mouth. I've been rehearsing my concert all morning, and Grandma baked 3 pies, even though I asked to limit myself to 1. Matthew's house turned out to be not a luxurious country villa, as Olivia had feared, but a spacious wooden manor house built with love of detail and respect for the surrounding landscape. The 2-story house with an attic and an open terrace seemed to grow out of the ground, merging with the surrounding forest. I designed it myself, Matthew said, noticing her admiring look. I've been building for 5 years, mostly on weekends for Mary and the future children. He broke off, and Olivia felt as if a whole world of unfulfilled hopes was hiding behind the short sentence. They were greeted at the door by a petite girl in a dress with a lace collar. His back was straight, his chin slightly raised, his gaze searching, but without childlike spontaneity. Dad, you're 14 minutes late, she said with a slight reproach. Grandma has already set the table for tea. Allison. Matthew crouched down in front of his daughter. Say hello to our guest. This is Mrs. Stone, the designer I told you about. The girl held out a thin palm. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Stone. Welcome to our home. In this formality, Olivia sensed not so much mannerism as the protective reaction of a child who had known loss early. Nice to meet you too, Allison. She shook the child's hand. I heard you play the piano. My son Kirk also studied music, but dropped out. I didn't have enough patience. Allison relaxed a little. Do you have a son? And how old is he? 17, and his daughter Sophia. She's 19. Why did you come without them? There was genuine childish curiosity in the question. Allison, Matthew chided gently. Nothing, Olivia smiled. They study in another city. They come only for vacations. An elderly woman appeared from the back of the house, short, with neatly arranged gray hair, in a simple dress and an apron. They bombarded the girl with questions, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. Come inside. The tea is getting cold. Irene Wilson, she introduced herself, shaking Olivia's hand. I'm glad Matthew finally brought a guest. It's all work and work. The house smelled of pies, wood, and some herbs. A large living room with a fireplace smoothly turned into a dining room and a kitchen. The panoramic windows overlooked the forest and a small lake in the distance. The whole space was organized in such a way as to let in as much light and nature as possible. What a thoughtful layout, Olivia couldn't resist. The house seems to be breathing. This is Matthew, Irene said proudly. He has a gift. Mary always said that he doesn't just build buildings, he creates a space for life. At the mention of his wife, Matthew did not look away, as many widowers are afraid to do. He nodded. Mary was my main critic and inspiration. She wouldn't let me compromise. Allison didn't say much over tea, watching her guest closely, but Irene turned out to be an excellent storyteller. She told how, after Mary's death, she moved from her apartment in Savannah to her granddaughter and son-in-law. I came to help with the newborn for a week, and I stayed that way for 8 years. She looked at Allison affectionately. How else would it be? Matthew is at work all day. Someone needs to look after the baby. Grandma was my rock, Matthew said seriously. I didn't understand at all what to do with the child then. The first year was a blur. Not at all. Irene waved her hand. I could have done it myself. A parent's heart always knows what to do. After tea, Allison invited everyone to the music room, where there was an antique piano. The Windsor, still an old model. Grandma brought it, Matthew explained, seeing that Olivia was examining the instrument. She said that her granddaughter should grow up with music. Allison sat down at the piano, squared her shoulders, froze for a moment, and then her slender fingers touched the keys. The melody of Beethoven's To Eliza filled the room. Pure, piercing. The girl played with childlike concentration, completely immersed in the music. Olivia felt a lump rise in her throat. She remembered how, at the same age, Sophia dropped out of music school, despite her obvious abilities. James then said, "Don't torture the child. If he doesn't want to, don't." But she could have insisted. After the impromptu concert, Matthew suggested a walk around the site. Allison wants to show you her pride, a flower garden. The spring sun was already warming in a completely summer way. They walked along manicured paths lined with young thuja trees. Allison, having settled in a little, talked about her plans for the flower garden. There'll be roses here and lavender here. Grandma says lavender scares away midges and mosquitoes. We'll also plant peonies. They are beautiful and bloom for a long time. Do you know what else grows well on such a sunny side? Olivia asked. Calendula. She has bright orange flowers, like little suns. Really? Allison's eyes lit up with interest. Do you have a flower garden? Olivia remembered the tiny garden on the balcony of their first apartment. When my husband and I first got married, I grew flowers in pots. Sophia and Kirk helped take care of them. And now? Allison thought about it. When did she stop growing flowers? When they moved into a new apartment with a view of the park, or when James said that luxury housing should not look like a rustic front garden. There's no time right now, she lied. Allison nodded gravely. I'm also very busy sometimes. School, music, Spanish. But Dad says you have to find time for important things. They came to the beds where the first spring flowers were already picking. Let's choose a place for the marigold, Allison suggested, taking Olivia's hand with unexpected trustfulness. Matthew watched them from a distance. His face softened, the wrinkle between his eyebrows smoothed out. You know, he said when Allison ran into the house to get gardening tools. I've never seen her get in touch with someone new so quickly. I'm lucky, Olivia smiled. I have a lot of experience with children. That's not the point, Matthew shook his head. Allison feels people with some kind of sixth sense. After Mary's death, she became careful, protecting herself from disappointment. Like her father? Olivia asked softly. Their eyes met. A moment of sincerity without masks and protective barriers. Just like her father, he admitted. In the evening, when Allison was already asleep and Irene had gone to her room, they were sitting on the terrace, covered with blankets. Stars dotted the dark sky. Not dim urban dots, but bright, shining worlds. Tell me about her, Olivia asked. About Mary? Matthew was silent for a long time, staring at the sky. We met at university, he finally began. She studied art history, I studied architecture. Mary was alive, really alive. She didn't just exist, but lived every day until the last minute. He told me how they got married in their 4th year, how they lived in a dorm, then rented a room, and how they dreamed of owning their own house. Mary got sick when we just started construction. Leukemia. No one thought she would be able to carry a child, but she insisted. She said, I have to leave something beautiful behind. Doctors warned about the risks. His voice faltered. She died an hour after Allison was born. I only managed to see my daughter and hold her in my arms, and I couldn't even grieve properly. I had to take care of the newborn. If it hadn't been for Irene, Olivia quietly covered his hand with hers. You did well, and Allison is an amazing girl. What about you and James? He began and stopped. I'm sorry, it's none of my business. No, it's fine. Olivia leaned back in her chair. It's a long story. We met young, got married for love, and had 2 children. And then he started to succeed in business, and gradually money, success, and power became more important to him than family. She paused. I probably should have left earlier, but it all seemed like it was temporary, that everything would get better. It's hard to destroy what you've been building for 20 years, Matthew nodded. It's not about the deadline. Olivia shook her head. It's just that at some point you realize that this man is no longer the one you fell in love with, and you are not the woman he once chose. People change. It's not always for the worse, Matthew remarked. Not always, she agreed. At the same time, in an expensive bar in downtown Philadelphia, James Stone was drinking with a longtime friend, Sam Ford, a burly man with a military bearing and attentive eyes. She's just gone crazy, James said, downing his 3rd glass of whiskey. 20 years of marriage went down the drain because of one affair. Sam was silently twirling a glass of whiskey in his hands. And where did she go? He asked. To some architect, James grimaced. To White. Matthew White. He seems to be a widower, and he's decent. Sam shuddered. Matthew White? Is he tall, with gray in his beard? Do you know him? Did you cross paths at work? He designed a new building for our office. Sam paused. Listen, leave her alone. I'm asking you kindly. James stared at his friend in surprise. What are you talking about? About seeing your eyes fill up. I know your passion for destruction, but you can't stand defeats out of the blue. Not in business. Not in life. She's my wife, James slammed on the table. She was your wife, Sam corrected calmly. Before you started hanging out with girls. How many have there been over the years? 10? 15? James looked away. He remembered the first one, Chloe, the pretty secretary from the 3rd year. She looked at him like a god, hung on every word, did everything he asked. It was flattering. Then there was Katie from accounting, Cindy, a masseuse from a fitness club, and Jane, a journalist who interviewed him. He couldn't remember all the names anymore. They merged into one image, young, admiring, accessible. This is different, he muttered. Just sex, nothing personal. And for them? Sam asked. And for Olivia? It's just sex for them, too. James looked at his friend with dislike. Since when did you become so righteous? I don't remember being very loyal myself. I paid for my mistakes in full. Sam's face froze. And I don't advise you to repeat my path. Let her go, James. If you love me, let me go. I can't, James said through gritted teeth. She's always been mine. Sam sighed and finished his whiskey. That's your problem. People are not property. You can't have them. Listen, James leaned across the table. You're a police officer. Punch this White for me. Maybe he's got a gun in his mouth. Tax evasion, bribes, whatever. I need dirt on him. I just want to know who my wife contacted. James smiled tightly. And if he's not as clean as he looks, Olivia needs to know about it. Sam stared at his friend for a long time, as if seeing him for the first time. Okay, he said finally. I'll find out what I can, but only for Olivia's sake. And if he turns out to be a decent person, you'll back off. Do you give me your word? Yes, James agreed easily, knowing that he would never hold back. When Sam left, he ordered another whiskey. The phone vibrated. Brianna. The 4th call of the evening. He dropped the call. This girl was becoming more demanding and intrusive. It's time to change it too, he thought. And the thought made me feel sick. James leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. Olivia's face appeared in my mind's eyes. Not today's, wary and alien, but the young, trusting-eyed face it was 20 years ago. What happened to me? The thought flashed unbidden. but he immediately pushed it away. Nothing happened. It's just life. Everyone goes through it. Returning to the city on Sunday evening, Olivia felt like a different person. Something had changed in her after those 2 days out of town. It was as if an old wound had begun to heal. Before leaving, Irene took her aside. Everyone has their own path to happiness, honey. But one thing I know for sure is that time heals only if you allow yourself to feel pain, not run away from it. Olivia nodded. You've been through a lot too. Through everything, the old lady smiled. I buried my husband early, my daughter, Mary's mother. I buried her 10 years ago, and then Mary. But life goes on, and there is always room for new happiness. Just take your time. Time is your best friend right now. Allison shoved an envelope into Olivia's hand. Open it when you're home, she whispered. And Matthew? Matthew just shook her hand, firmly, confidently. But there was more in his gaze than any words could express. Come back, he said. Just like that, for no reason, whenever you want. At home, Olivia opened the envelope from Allison. Inside was a child's drawing, bright orange marigold flowers and 2 figures, one large and one small, holding hands among these flowers. Olivia clutched the drawing to her chest, and for the first time in a long time, really smiled. The district court greeted Olivia with the hollow echo of footsteps on the marble floor and the official smell of paper. She tightened her grip on the file folder and squared her shoulders, trying to stop her knees from shaking. People came to these walls to share property, children, the past, everything that was once considered common and indestructible. Miss Karen Miller, her lawyer, walked beside her, collected and businesslike, carrying a battered leather briefcase that had seen dozens of similar cases. Don't worry, she said, noticing Olivia's pallor. Just answer the questions honestly and to the point. Leave your emotions at the door. A slight nod was all Olivia could manage. Emotions are outside the door. If only it were that simple. She saw James in the hallway. Immaculate suit, perfect haircut, confident posture. Next to him stood a tall man with a sleek face and sharp eyes, Kyle Blackwell, one of the most expensive divorce lawyers. James met her eyes. Not a shadow of embarrassment or remorse, just a kind of businesslike concentration, as before important corporate negotiations. He gave her a curt nod and turned back to his lawyer, discussing something in a low voice. This man has been my husband for 20 years, Olivia thought with a sudden chill of alienation. She suddenly realized that she had never really known him. Behind the mask of a loving spouse, behind the usual gestures and words, a complete stranger was hiding. The meeting began at 10 a.m. sharp. The judge, a tired, middle-aged woman with attentive eyes, opened the hearing and gave the floor to Blackwell. Dear Court, James' lawyer began in a honeyed voice. My client, Mr. James Stone, fully acknowledges the fact of the breakdown of family relations and agrees to the dissolution of the marriage. The only question is a fair division of property. He paused dramatically. The condominium in Glendale was purchased with funds from my principal. Lakewood Development is also his brainchild. Cale Blackwell continued. The plaintiff, Mrs. Olivia Stone, has not worked officially since the birth of her first child almost 20 years ago. All these years, she has led the lifestyle of a well-off housewife without participating in the creation of family capital. Olivia felt the heat rising in her face. A well-off housewife. So that's how James saw their life together. And the years when she stood at the stove with a baby in her arms while he was studying at the university, and sleepless nights with sick children, and all those design projects that she did for his company for free, because we're a family. Why do we need formalities? Miss Miller, her lawyer, stood up, asking for the words, Dear Court, my client was not just running a household. She was responsible for raising 2 children, which allowed the defendant to fully focus on business development. Miss Miller paused. In addition, Mrs. Stone has a professional degree in design and has done work for her husband's company. Not documented, Blackwell interrupted. Where are the contracts? Where are the payouts? Oh yeah, there aren't any. The judge tapped her pen on the table, calling for order. This was followed by a grueling interrogation of witnesses. James's chief financial officer confirmed that Olivia had never been on staff. The commercial director added that all decisions were made personally by Mr. Stone. Family friends who were called by Blackwell, as if by agreement, recalled how Olivia loved to go shopping and always vacationed at the best resorts. With each word, Olivia understood more clearly. James has been preparing for this process for a long time and carefully, perhaps even before she discovered his infidelity. He processed mutual acquaintances, collected evidence, and built a strategy. "We're calling the next witness," Blackwell announced. "Miss Brianna White." A rustle of surprise swept through the hall. Olivia went cold. James's mistress is here, at their divorce proceedings. A young woman entered the room, a fragile blonde with a doll's face, no older than 25. She fiddled with her purse nervously, avoiding looking at Olivia. "Please introduce yourself," the judge said. "Brianna White, Mr. James Stone's personal assistant," the girl replied softly. "So that's what it's called now," Olivia thought bitterly. Blackwell began asking prepared questions. How long has Brianna been working for the company? Had she ever seen Olivia in the office? Does he know about her involvement in the company? All the questions were answered as expected. Almost a year. Never. No way. Olivia stole a glance at James. He was leaning forward slightly, with the poker face of a poker player. Only the muscles twitching on his cheekbones betrayed his tension. "Does the defense have any questions for the witness?" the judge asked. Miss Miller rose slowly to her feet. "Tell me, Miss White, what exactly are the responsibilities of Mr. Stone's personal assistant?" Brianna looked at James, who shook his head slightly. "I keep his schedule, answer calls, arrange meetings. Is that all?" Miss Miller asked with emphasis. At that moment, the door to the courtroom quietly opened. Olivia turned around and froze. Sophia and Kirk were standing in the doorway. The daughter is wearing a formal dark dress that Olivia has not seen before. The son is wearing his father's jacket, slightly too big for his shoulders. They walked across the room and sat down right behind Olivia. Sophia squeezed her mother's hand tightly. "What are you doing here?" Olivia whispered. "We support you," Kirk replied simply. The judge looked at the newcomers. "Please introduce yourself." "Sofia Andreevna Sokolova, the daughter of the plaintiff and the defendant," the girl said clearly. "Karol Andreevich Sokolov, my son," the young man added. Andrei's face distorted, a mixture of surprise, annoyance, and a strange vulnerability. It's one thing to play a game with your wife, but it's quite another to do it in front of the children. "I have a petition," Sophia suddenly said, standing up. "I want to testify as a witness." The judge was confused for a moment, then nodded. "Come here." Maintaining an impeccable posture, Sophia walked to the witness stand. At the age of 19, she looked strikingly collected and mature. "Sofia Andreevna," the judge began, "do you understand that you are under oath and must tell the truth?" "Yes, I understand," the girl nodded and spoke calmly, looking directly at the judge. "I want to tell you about what I've known since childhood. My mom always worked. When we were sick, she sat with us during the day, and at night, she made sketches for Dad's projects. When Dad brought potential clients home, Mom cooked dinner for 20 people and presented design concepts for their future homes." Sophia took a deep breath. "I still have dozens of sketches that my mom made for my dad's company. There is her signature and the seal of the company. I brought them with me." She took a folder out of her bag. The judge accepted the documents and skimmed through them. "I also want to say that when I was 14, I personally heard how my dad promised my mom to take over her share in the company as soon as the tax audit was settled. That was 5 years ago. Since then, there have been other reasons. It's not a good time. We'll finish a major project first after the new year. There was always a reason." Andrei listened to his daughter with clenched teeth. Marina saw his knuckles turn white as they gripped the arms of the chair. After Sophia, Cyril took the floor. He spoke in a restrained, masculine manner, sparingly but convincingly about how his mother gave up her career for the sake of her family, how she supported his father at the beginning of his business, and how she always stood behind him, allowing him to be at the forefront. When he finished, there was silence in the hall. Kruglov was writing something down feverishly. Andre sat motionless, staring at one point. Marina looked at her children with surprise and pride. When did they grow up so much? When did you learn to see and understand what is happening behind the facade of external well-being? After the break, the trial resumed. Despite the testimony of the children, James' legal position remained stronger. Olivia had no documents confirming her contribution to the purchase of the property. There was no employment contract with her husband's company, and there weren't even any witnesses. Family friends, fearing to spoil relations with an influential businessman, chose not to interfere. The court is retiring to make a decision, the judge announced after 3 hours of the hearing. In the hallway, Olivia hugged the children. "Thank you, dear ones. But how did you find out?" Emily called, Sophia confessed. "She said that she had been informed about the trial. We flew out right away." James stood off to the side, not daring to approach. Kirk caught his eye and pointedly turned away. Sophia, on the other hand, went straight to her father. "Dad," she said softly but firmly, "you taught me that the strong protect the weak, not take advantage of their vulnerability. Do you remember?" A frown creased James' forehead. He wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. "I'm not asking you to go back to your mom," Sophia continued. "You can do the decent thing. It's not too late." When the trial resumed, the atmosphere in the courtroom changed. The judge read out the decision. The marriage is annulled. James Stone owns the condo and the car. Olivia Stone is awarded child support for her minor son and compensation in the amount of 1/5 of the cost of the condominium. The amount was not enough to buy even a modest home. The defendant is given the right to buy out the plaintiff's share. Until the compensation is paid, the plaintiff has the right to live in a condominium. The judge paused. Within a week. Olivia clenched her fists. A week. She has only a week to find a place to live and pack her things. Miss Miller warned that the outcome could be unfavorable, but the reality turned out to be harder than predicted. Blackwell was smiling triumphantly as he gathered up the papers. James sat motionless, not looking at anyone. Sophia and Kirk froze with identical expressions of disappointment on their faces. "The trial is over," the judge announced, banging the gavel. Sam called James that evening. "We need to meet. It's urgent." They met at the same bar. James, contrary to expectations, did not look triumphant, rather tired and lost. "Congratulations on your victory." Without a smile, Sam said, sitting down opposite. "What victory?" James asked frowningly, twirling his glass in his hands. "You won the court, you put your wife out on the street. Isn't that what you wanted?" James grimaced. "I didn't want the kids to find out, to look at me like that." "What did you expect? That they'll be thrilled with what you're doing to their mother?" He took out a folder and put it on the table. "I checked your white as you asked. An impeccable reputation. A respected architect, a good father. Not a single stain, except for the story with his wife. She died in childbirth. But this can hardly be considered a compromise." James flipped through the papers, grimaced. "There must be something else. No one is ever that perfect." "He's not perfect," Sam said wearily. "You know, there are still such things." He paused, then added, "So forget about your plans. I won't dig any deeper into it. I don't recommend it to you either." "Are you threatening me?" James narrowed his eyes. "I'm warning you," Sam replied calmly. "As a friend. Stop before it gets worse." He got up and threw the money for the drinks on the table. "You know, when I saw you in court today, I didn't recognize you. Where's the guy who pulled me out of the shelling in Iraq and then helped me get back on my feet? Where did he go, James?" "Life has changed," he replied dully. "Life, yes. And you?" Sam shook his head. "You've turned into someone you once despised. The person for whom money and control are most important." James wanted to respond sharply, but the words wouldn't come. He watched in silence as Sam walked away, shoulders wide, military, straight, unbending, the way he had once been. Olivia was sitting in an empty apartment surrounded by boxes. Most of the things were already packed. It's strange how few really important items accumulate over 20 years of life. Photo albums, letters, children's drawings, a few books, everything else is just stuff. Kirk insisted on staying with her and helping with the move. Sophia returned to the university, but called every day, checking on the progress of the search for housing. And there was trouble with housing. The money that Olivia had left was only enough for a few months of rent. Buying an apartment was out of the question. It would have been possible to stay with Emily temporarily, but her elderly mother lived in her small two-bedroom apartment, and there was no extra room. The phone rang. "Olivia, how was the trial?" Matthew asked without preamble. Olivia sighed. "Not in my favor. I have a week to move out." Silence on the other end of the line. "Then I have a suggestion. I rent a studio apartment in the center. The tenants are just moving out next week. If you want, you can stay there until you find something permanent." Olivia tensed. "Matthew, I appreciate your concern, but—" "No buts," he interrupted. "It's just a friend's help. No strings attached. You will pay as much as you can. When you find another place to live, you'll move out." She was silent, struggling with conflicting feelings. Pride demanded to refuse. Common sense is to accept help. "I don't want to be obligated," she finally said. "You won't." There was a smile in his voice. "Consider this a repayment of a karmic debt. They helped me once, too, when I was at the bottom." He paused, then added more gently, "Olivia, just let me help you, without any conditions. I know what it's like to start life all over again." Tears welled up in my eyes. She brushed them away with the back of her hand. "Thank you. I'll accept your help." After the call, Olivia sat for a long time looking at the phone. Strangely, for the first time in many days, she felt not despair, but something like hope. It was like spring had come after a long winter, timid, uncertain, but promising warmth. Tomorrow she had to pick up the last of her things and close the apartment door behind her forever. But today she suddenly realized this is not the end. This is the beginning. Olivia's things fit into 4 cardboard boxes and 1 suitcase. Kirk helped his mother carry them out in the drizzling rain and put them in the trunk of a taxi. I could feel my father's gaze from the apartment window on my spine, but I never turned around. Matthew's apartment turned out to be a small space in an old house with high ceilings. A bright one-room apartment with a bay window, wooden frames, and creaky parquet. Nothing to do with the cold functionality of new buildings, which Olivia has become accustomed to in recent years. "It's a little shabby here," Matthew admitted sheepishly, showing her the place. "I specialize more in country houses, and urban apartments are not my profile." Olivia ran her hand over the old sideboard. "There's a soul here. It feels like the house remembers other times." He smiled with relief. "My aunt, Marina's relative, used to live here. I bought an apartment after her death, rented it out to students, but I still couldn't get around to make repairs." "Maybe it's for the best," Olivia suddenly smiled. "I will need the first project for my portfolio. What do you say if I start by transforming this place?" Kirk stayed with his mother for the first week, helping to settle in. Marina noticed how quickly her son had matured. At the age of 17, he carried himself with the seriousness of a man who had responsibility for his family on his shoulders. "You don't have to be here all the time," she told him on the 5th day. "You need to study for exams." Carol looked up from his physics textbook. "I'm coping, and I want to make sure you're okay." "I'm fine." She sat down next to him and put her arm around his shoulders. "Really, you gave me time to recover. Now go back to the university, otherwise you will lose your scholarship. And please take the money that I transfer to you and don't send it back." He frowned. "You need it more." "I've already found the first order," Marina shook her head. "It's small, but it's enough for a start. And Maxim charges a reasonable rent. I can handle it." After his son's departure, the apartment was filled with ringing silence. Marina wandered through the rooms, confusedly touching the old furniture, looking at the cracked wallpaper. For 20 years, she lived in close contact with other people, first with my parents, then with my husband and children. The silence was frightening and at the same time gave a strange feeling of freedom. She started doing her first design project for herself, creating a new look for the apartment she was going to live in for an unknown amount of time. Vera lent her a laptop with professional software. Marina worked enthusiastically, forgetting about food and time, sketching until late at night. Maxim stopped by to check on her on the third day, brought bags of groceries. "I was just passing by," he said, shifting uncomfortably in the doorway, as if embarrassed to trespass on her territory. She was surprised to find that she was glad to see him. She showed sketches of the apartment's transformation, asked for opinions. He looked carefully, professionally assessing the lines and proportions, and suddenly broke into a boyish smile. "Are you really going to make the bay window a library?" "I dreamed about it when I bought an apartment." "With a padded window seat built in shelves and a reading lamp," she nodded. So began their joint work on the transformation of the apartment. Maxim helped with the drawings and gave advice on structural elements. Marina determined the color scheme, textures, and lighting. They argued, found compromises, and laughed at common jokes. One evening, as they sat over their sketches, shoulders touching in the cramped confines of the small kitchen, Maxim suddenly put his hand over hers. "You know, Marina, I think it's time for us to switch to you, Dot." She jumped in surprise, but did not take her hand away. I looked into his eyes, brown, warm, with wrinkles at the corners. "It's probably time," she agreed quietly. "This little change has changed everything." You. Instead of you, she created a new reality, fragile, full of uncertainty, but attractive. They started calling more often, and sometimes they had dinner together. Matthew talked about his projects. Olivia talked about her first steps as an independent designer. In early November, he brought her his first real client, a colleague who had bought an apartment and needed an interior design. "I wouldn't recommend you if I wasn't confident in your professionalism," Matthew said when the client left. "This is not a favor, but a well-deserved job." Those words warmed her more than all the compliments James had showered on her in the last years of their marriage. Olivia found herself thinking almost nothing about her ex-husband, only when you need to discuss something about children. By the end of November, the interior of the apartment had changed beyond recognition. The walls were dressed in soft shades of green and sand. The old parquet found a new life under the careful hands of the restorer Matthew found. The bay window has been transformed into a cozy reading nook with bookshelves surrounding a cushioned window seat. An antique sideboard, cleaned of layers of paint, revealed the nobility of the old wood. "This is amazing," Matthew breathed as Olivia guided him through the renovated apartment. "Like in a magazine, only warmer, livelier." "I tried to preserve the soul of this place," she confessed, "not to turn it into a glossy picture." They were standing in the middle of the living room, surrounded by the fresh smell of paint and varnish, and suddenly Matthew took a step towards her. Awkwardly, like a teenager on a first date, he took her by the shoulders and kissed her lightly on the lips. It all happened so naturally and unexpectedly at the same time that Olivia was taken aback. He immediately retreated, blushing. "I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't have." "No, it's fine," she touched her lips with her fingers. "I just haven't been preparing for this for a long time." "Me too," he confessed. "The last time I kissed a woman was 8 years ago. I'm afraid I've lost all my skills." She laughed for the first time in a long time, sincerely, heartily, and that laugh seemed to break a dam. Matthew stepped forward, pulled her to him, and now the kiss turned out to be real, long, tremulous with a hint of fear and hope. "I'm scared," Olivia whispered as they pulled away from each other. "I'm afraid to trust you again and lose you again. And I'm afraid I won't be able to love as much as I loved Mary," he replied softly. "That it wouldn't be fair to you." They looked at each other. Two people with scars on their hearts, two loneliness looking for warmth. "Should we just take our time? Olivia suggested. Give yourself time. He nodded, gently brushing a lock of hair from her face. All the time in the world. By mid-December, Olivia was already running 3 projects, small, but generating steady income. Her first client recommended her to his friends, who recommended her to their friends. A small snowflake of reputation began to turn into a snowball. Sophia called regularly, proudly telling about her achievements at the university. Kirk came over almost every weekend to help his mother with minor repairs. On his last visit, he ran into Matthew for the first time and surprised Olivia with his reaction. He shook hands, looked at the man seriously, and whispered to his mother as he left, "He seems to be good." It was only 3 words, but they meant more than any long approval. New Year's garlands were already being hung on Ward Street, and shop windows sparkled with festive decorations. Olivia was walking through the evening city, holding a folder with sketches for a new client under her arm. A light frost stung my cheeks, and the snow creaked under my boots. The city was preparing for the new year, the first new year in her new life. The phone beeped with a message from Matthew. "Will you meet me for dinner? I have a suggestion." In the cozy restaurant, where jazz was playing softly, Matthew looked unusually excited. "Allison asks, when are you coming to visit again?" He began, stirring his coffee. "She misses you. And Grandma, too." Olivia smiled. "I miss them, too. Around your house." "Our house?" Matthew corrected softly, looking into her eyes. "I wanted to suggest maybe you, Sophia, and Kirk will celebrate New Year's Eve with us at the country house. Quiet, family-like." Olivia thought about it. New Year's Eve has always been a family holiday for her. Since school, when Mom baked her favorite apple pie and Dad dressed up as Santa Claus, before your own family life with a traditional Christmas tree to the ceiling and children's gifts. "Children are unlikely to want to celebrate with their father after all that has happened," she said at last. "And I don't want them to be alone that night, so I'm inviting you all." Matthew put his hand over hers. "Allison will be happy. She's already planning a Christmas concert and is asking if Sophia plays the piano." "She used to play," Olivia smiled, "but she quit at the age of 12, even though she had talent." "You see," Matthew said softly, "there is already a topic for conversation. Agree to it." She looked at the interlacing of their fingers on the table. A man's hand, large, with calluses on the palm, with protruding veins, reliably covered her hand, not squeezing, but giving a feeling of protection. "Yes," she replied simply. "We'll be there." Unbeknownst to herself, Marina began to perceive the apartment on Chisti Prudi as a home. Small details inhabited the space. Photos of children on a shelf, a favorite cup in the kitchen, a blanket brought by Maxim from a country house, because there is a cold battery here. She returned here from work, kicked off her shoes in the hallway, and the feeling of "I'm at home" enveloped her along with the smell of cinnamon and oranges, her new favorite fragrance for home. Professional confidence grew with each new project. Marina started an Instagram page where she posted photos of her work. I created a simple portfolio website with the help of Sophia, who studied web design. I started dreaming about my own design studio, still small, but my own. A few days before the new year, Maxim helped her pick up the children from the airport. Sophia, who had lost weight and matured, hugged her mother tightly and whispered in her ear, "I've seen your work online." "It's amazing, Mom." Carol looked at Maxim carefully, as if assessing whether his attitude towards his mother had changed over time. But he quickly thawed out when he offered to show him his workshop after the holidays, where he created architectural models. The small apartment was filled with young voices, laughter, and energy. It became cramped, but cozy. Marina found herself thinking that for the first time in many years, she felt truly happy without any admixture of fear, doubt, or anxiety for the future. On the evening before she left the city, Sophia found her mother in the kitchen having a cup of tea. "Tell me," she demanded with a sly smile, "what's going on with Maxim?" "It's probably all so new and strange at my age." "Mom, you're not 40, Sophia rolled her eyes. "And from the way he looks at you, you can tell for sure. He's head over heels in love." Did you notice? Olivia felt her cheeks flush. A blind man would have noticed, the daughter snorted. And Kirk approves too, by the way. He told me that Matthew is a real man, not a poseur like his father. At that moment, the phone rang. Her ex-husband's name appeared on the screen. James was sitting in an empty apartment, twirling a glass of whiskey in his hands. There was a pregnancy test with 2 strips on the coffee table nearby. Brianna left it in a prominent place before rushing off to her friend's house to discuss the good news. He should have felt joy. A child, a new life, an opportunity to start all over again, to build a real family, not one that was formed by chance in his youth, but a conscious, mature one. But instead of joy, James felt a strange emptiness. He was looking at Brianna's picture on his phone, a young face, lightly doll-like, with capriciously curved lips, bright, effective, always ready to please. A woman he had known for just over a year. Is it possible to build with her what happened with Olivia? 20 years of intimacy, when a person becomes a part of you, an extension of your soul. Children who carry your traits, your blood, your character. Shared memories, shared jokes, a silence in which there is no need to pretend. Brianna had been calling him all day again, demanding an appointment. He was dropping calls, citing his busy schedule. He himself did not understand why the news about the child did not excite him. Maybe because everything happened too fast. Maybe it was because Olivia's image was still in front of his eyes. When the phone rang for the 10th time, James looked at the screen with annoyance, but instead of Brianna's name, the name of Karen, his secretary, appeared. "I'm listening," he replied dryly. "Mr. Stone, I'm sorry for the late call." Karen sounded worried. "We have a problem with the documents for the new site. Miss White did not give the power of attorney to the notary, although she claimed to have done so." James sighed. "I'll figure it out tomorrow, Karen. Thank you for letting me know." And also, the secretary hesitated. "I'm sorry to say this, but Miss White was telling the girls at the office today that you're getting married and having a baby." "What?" James straightened up abruptly. "We haven't discussed any wedding." "That's what I thought," Karen sighed. "She even showed the test. But then I accidentally overheard her talking to a friend in the bathroom. She said that she would trick the old man and that he didn't need to know who the child was really from." The silence that hung in the receiver was deafening. "Mr. Stone, I realize that I'm meddling in my own business," Karen hurriedly continued. "But I've been working with you for 6 years, and I can't keep quiet. She meets with Mike from the sales department when you're not there. Everyone knows about it." James slowly set the glass down on the table. Something inside him snapped. The last illusion, the last self-deception. He thanked his secretary, hung up the phone, and sat motionless for a long time, staring at one point. Then he stood up resolutely, found Olivia's number, and pressed the call button. "Hello?" Her voice was slightly guarded, but it was so familiar. "I'm calling to find out how you're going to celebrate the new year," he said, trying to sound normal. "I need to know when I can see the kids." "We're going out of town," Olivia replied after a short pause. "We'll be back on the 3rd. "With this architect?" He couldn't help but ask. "Yes, James. With Matthew and his family," she calmly confirmed. "The kids want it." The silence was heavy, filled with unspoken things. "Olivia," he suddenly said in a completely different tone, "are you happy?" She hesitated, and he could almost feel her deciding whether to answer sincerely. "Yes," she finally said. He swallowed the lump in his throat. "I'm happy for you." And I was surprised to realize that I wasn't lying. Something in him really rejoiced at her newfound happiness. A spark of humanity not completely extinguished by cynicism, selfishness, and a thirst for possession. "Tell the children that I love them," he added, "and Happy New Year." After finishing the conversation, James got up and went to the window. The city sparkled with New Year's lights and festive tinsel. People were rushing about their business, carrying bags of gifts, Christmas toys, bottles of champagne. We were preparing for the main family holiday of the year. For the first time, he would meet him alone in an empty apartment, at an empty table, without children's laughter, without the smell of his mother's pies, without the traditional speech of the president on TV, which he and Olivia always listened to, holding hands, making a wish to the chimes. All this was in the past, and he himself had let it go, exchanged it for fleeting pleasure, for the illusion of freedom, for the fake brilliance of young mistresses. James slowly sank into a chair, covered his face with his hands, and began to cry for the first time in many years. Silently, in a manly manner, restrained, but sincerely, mourning not so much the lost family as the person he had ceased to be. Snow continued to fall outside, covering the city with a white blanket, erasing the traces of last year and preparing a blank canvas for the new one. Matthew's country house greeted them with frosty silence and the smell of pine needles. A fluffy fir tree, brought from the forest, took pride of place in the living room, not yet dressed up, waiting for a joint decoration ritual. Irene had been busy in the kitchen since early morning, refusing any help. Let the old woman please the family. Family? This word sounded unusual and at the same time correct. Olivia watched as Kirk helped Matthew install the fir tree in the crosspiece, as Sophia and Allison hung garlands on the windows. Who would have thought 6 months ago that she would celebrate the new year not in a city apartment with James, but in a wooden house surrounded by people who had recently been strangers? What are you thinking about? Matthew sat down next to her, holding out a cup of hot chocolate. He smelled of frost and pine needles. About how strange everything turned out, she accepted the cup, warming her cold hands. It seems to be an accident, a coincidence, but it turns out that someone from above thought it all out. Accidents are not accidental, he smiled. That's what my grandmother used to say. Allison, serious beyond her age, stepped forward with an armful of Christmas tree toys. Dad, Sophia and I found some old toys, the ones that were still Mom's. Thin glass balls, tarnished silver cones, cardboard Santa with a worn beard, toys from the last century that preserved the memory of another life, another family. Matthew froze for a moment, and Olivia saw a shadow cross his face, but he quickly pulled himself together and smiled at his daughter. That's a great idea. Mary loved these toys. They're still from her childhood. Sophia carefully picked up the fragile glass ballerina. Can I hang it? Of course, Matthew nodded. She belongs on our fir tree. Olivia caught Irene's gaze, wise, understanding. The old lady nodded slightly and mouthed, That's right. Life goes on, and the memory of the past should not interfere with the present. By evening, the house was transformed. The Christmas tree was ablaze with lights, and the table was full of treats. The photo album, worn, with faded pictures of the 80s and bright digital 90s, passed from hand to hand. Olivia was looking at young Matthew with a beautiful dark-haired girl, Mary, whom she recognized only from stories. Strangely, she felt no jealousy, only a light sadness. By 9 o'clock, Sophia sat down at the piano. The first timid chords of Jingle Bells, and Allison, without saying a word, began to sing along in her ringing voice. Sophia winked at the girl, and the melody smoothly flowed into a popular New Year's song. Kirk, who was shy at first, joined the chorus. His cracking baritone added depth to the children's singing. Matthew and Olivia stood in the doorway, watching the impromptu concert. His hand found hers, fingers interlaced. Such a simple and meaningful touch. Look, he whispered, it's all real. Olivia knew what he was talking about. After so many years of living in a theater of pretense, where feelings were portrayed rather than experienced, where words meant one thing and actions another, the simplicity and sincerity of this evening seemed almost unreal. The doorbell rang suddenly and abruptly, pulling everyone out of the cozy atmosphere of the holiday. Matthew frowned and let go of Olivia's hand. It's strange. I'm not expecting anyone. When he opened the door, James was standing on the threshold in an expensive coat with a huge package of gifts, with the face of a man ready to refuse but hoping for a miracle. "Hello," he said, shifting from one foot to the other. "I didn't want to interrupt. I just brought gifts for the children." There was a tense silence in the living room. Sophia and Kirk froze. Allison instinctively moved closer to her grandmother. Matthew straightened up, ready to defend his home and his new family. "Come in." Irene was the first to break the silence. "It's freezing outside. It's not good to keep a man in the doorway, especially on New Year's Eve." James hesitantly stepped over the threshold, and Olivia was surprised to see how her ex-husband had changed over the past months. He lost weight, early gray hair appeared on his temples, deep wrinkles lay around his eyes. But the main thing is the look. Instead of the usual self-confidence, there's a mixture of guilt, fatigue, and a glimmer of some new determination. "I'm not staying," he said after a moment. "I just wanted to congratulate you and give it away." He handed the package to Kirk, but Kirk made no attempt to take it. Sophia got up from the piano and went over to her father. "Hi, Dad." The ice broke. James awkwardly hugged his daughter and kissed the top of her head. "Happy New Year, Sophie." Kirk was still distant, but less hostile. He accepted the package and nodded his thanks. "I'd like to talk to your mom." James looked in Olivia's direction. "In private, if possible." Matthew silently stepped back, allowing them to enter the next room. It was frosty on the veranda, but there was no wind. The falling snow created the illusion of isolation from the world, an enclosed space where only honest conversation was possible. "You look great," James began. "The homely atmosphere suits you." "Thanks." Marina wrapped her cardigan around her. "I didn't expect to see you here." He nodded, understanding what was left unsaid. "I didn't plan to come, but this morning I woke up in an empty apartment and realized that I couldn't do this. I can't celebrate New Year's Eve alone, knowing that my children are out with a stranger." "Matthew is no stranger to them," Olivia replied softly. "I know." He raised his hand, stopping a possible argument. "That's not what I'm talking about. I just wanted to apologize. For real." Snow fell on his bare head, on the shoulders of his expensive coat. Olivia suddenly remembered another James, a young soldier who had returned from Iraq, with the same open gaze, with the same straight back. "I was an idiot," he continued, not waiting for an answer. "A selfish, narcissistic idiot. I destroyed the best thing in my life, our family. And it's only now that I'm starting to realize what I've lost." "No need," Olivia began, but he stopped her with a gesture again. "I need to. I have to say this at least once before the new year arrives. I'm sorry to you, Olivia, to the children. I betrayed you. He betrayed me not only by cheating, but also by the way he behaved afterwards. At the trial, during the division of property, I behaved like the last one." He paused, breathing heavily. His words hung between them like white clouds of steam in the frosty air. "What happened to you?" "What is it?" she asked, looking at the man she had once loved more than her life. "When did you change so much?" James shrugged his shoulders. "Gradually, day after day. First, money, success. They're intoxicating, you know. Then power over people, over circumstances, the ability to get any woman. I began to consider myself special, worthy of more than an ordinary family life." He smiled bitterly, and then life slapped me in the face. "Brianna, she wasn't pregnant at all. She just wanted to force me to get married. And when that didn't work, she went to a young manager from my company." Olivia said nothing. Strangely, she felt neither gloating nor satisfaction, only weariness and vague pity. "I'm not looking for your sympathy." He correctly interpreted her silence. "I got what I deserved and realized something important. You can't build happiness on the unhappiness of others. I want to start over with a clean slate, not with you." I understand that this is impossible, but with a new attitude to life, to people. He hesitated, then added, I would like to establish a relationship with the children, if that's okay with you. Olivia looked at him carefully, appraisingly, as one looks at a person whom one sees for the first time. I don't decide. They're already adults. It's their choice, to forgive you or not. James nodded. Fair enough. Thank you for listening. He turned towards the door, but suddenly stopped. He turned around. He's a good man. Your architect? Yes, Olivia replied simply. I'm glad, James said, tears glistening in his eyes. I'm really happy for you. Returning to the living room was awkward. Everyone pretended to be minding their own business, but it was obvious that they were waiting for the conversation to end. Irene immediately started fussing. It's cold outside, Mr. Stone. Let's have some hot tea or mulled wine. To Olivia's surprise, James agreed. Tea, if possible. Just for a little while. I don't want to interfere with your holiday. Matthew caught Olivia's eye and raised an eyebrow. Is everything okay? She nodded slightly. Yes. The next half hour passed in a strange but not hostile atmosphere. James told the children about his plans to open a charitable foundation to support families who have lost their breadwinner, about how he rethought a lot of things in life. Kirk listened warily, but without the previous aggression. Sophia asked the questions carefully, to the point. When James got up to leave, Allison suddenly approached him. Would you like to stay for my concert? I'll be playing at 12 in front of the chimes. Everyone froze, waiting for Matthew's reaction. He hesitated, then smiled at his daughter. Of course, if Mr. Stone wants to, he can stay. Thanks. James looked at them in confusion, not believing in such a turn of events. I'd love to hear it. The tension gradually subsided. Kirk suddenly inquired about the affairs of his father's company. Sophia showed her student works. James asked carefully, trying not to push, but showing genuine interest. As the hands of the clock approached 12, Allison, as promised, sat down at the piano. The sounds of Tchaikovsky's The Four Seasons began to flow. December. For an 8-year-old girl, she played amazingly, with a sense and a childish understanding of music. Olivia watched James' face as he listened to Matthew's daughter play, and saw in his eyes not envy, not jealousy, but something like acceptance. Recognizing another person's right to be happy, even if that happiness includes someone you once considered your own. After the concert, everyone went out on the porch to celebrate the new year in the open air, as was customary in Matthew's family. The snow stopped snowing, and the stars poured out into the black winter sky, bright, cold, infinitely distant. Kirk started counting down, looking at his watch. 7. Sophia said, putting her arm around Allison's shoulders. 5. The little pianist's clear voice echoed through the snowy garden. 4, 3. Irene held a glass of champagne, smiling to herself. 2, 1. They all gasped together. Happy New Year. The screams merged with the first stroke of the chimes from the old radio, which was brought out onto the porch. Clinking glasses, hugs, kisses, congratulations are a ritual that unites people at the moment of transition, from the old to the new, from the past to the future. James hugged the children, shook Matthew's hand, awkwardly kissed Olivia on the cheek, and began to say goodbye. I have to go. Thank you for everything. As he got into the car, he called out to Kirk, Son, come to the office next week. There's a conversation about your future. If you want to, of course. Kirk hesitated, then nodded. Okay, I'll call you. When the guests had gone to their rooms, Irene took Allison to bed. Sophia and Kirk settled into the guest bedrooms. Matthew invited Olivia to take a walk in the garden. Won't you freeze? With you? No, she smiled. The night was surprisingly quiet. The moon peeked out from behind the clouds, flooding the snow-covered garden with silver light. Their footsteps left footprints in the untouched snow, 2 paths side by side. Are you okay? Matthew asked, stopping by an old apple tree. After meeting your ex-husband? I'm fine. She squeezed his hand. You know, it's weird, but I'm grateful to him. If it wasn't for his betrayal, I would never have found the strength to change my life. I wouldn't have met you. He put his arms around her, drawing her to him, warming her frozen cheeks with his breath. I am also grateful to fate. When Mary died, I thought that I would never be able to be happy again, that I would just exist for Allison. And then you came along and brought colors, sounds, and taste back into my life. I've regained the desire to live, not just survive. They were standing in the middle of a snow-covered garden. Two people who went through pain and loss, who found each other when they no longer hoped for happiness. Matthew got down on one knee in the snow. I know that we've only known each other for 6 months. I know you're just getting a divorce. I know that all this is probably too fast, but I'm more confident in my feelings than I've ever been in my life. Will you marry me? She looked at him, kneeling with a serious face, with snowflakes melting in his dark hair, and saw in his eyes something she had never seen in James even in the best years of their marriage. Absolute selfless love, not a desire to possess, but a desire to make her happy. Not a passion, but a deep conscious feeling. Yes, she replied simply. Of course, yes. Early spring turned out to be extremely warm this year. Already in early April, the first flowers bloomed, the grass turned green, and the trees were clothed in delicate foliage. It seemed that nature was in a hurry to congratulate Olivia and Matthew on their upcoming wedding. Preparations were in full swing at the country house, which had become Olivia's second home. Allison and Sophia were running around the garden, choosing flowers for the bride's bouquet. Their clear voices, so different in timbre but equally happy, reached the open veranda, where Olivia was sitting with a sketch of her wedding dress. Don't tell me you're going to sew it yourself. Irene shook her head, looking at the sketch. The bride should be free from worries. No, Olivia smiled. I just wanted to show the dressmaker exactly what I want. A simple dress without too much chic. You'll be a beauty in a sack. The old woman patted her hand affectionately. Matthew just glows when he looks at you, just like in my youth. Preparations for the wedding went on as usual. We decided to celebrate modestly, only with our loved ones. Matthew insisted on the wedding in an old wooden church not far from the house. I want it to be real, he said. And Olivia agreed, even though she had never thought about a religious ceremony before. Sophia moved to a country house immediately after the winter session, taking a semester off. I want to be with my family, she explained to her mother, and Olivia understood her without words. Sophia needed healing as much as she did. The girl became friends with Allison, started playing the piano again, walked a lot in the woods, helped Irene in the garden. Kirk came over for the weekend, bringing his friends from the university. The wooden house was filled with young voices, laughter, and music. Matthew looked at it with surprise and joy. I didn't think it would be so noisy and fun here again. One day in April, when the wedding was a week away, an expensive car pulled up to the house. Olivia, who was working on a summer porch project, looked up and saw James. He looked fit, rejuvenated, in simple clothes without the usual polish. Hi, she said, stepping out onto the porch. I didn't expect to see you. I wanted to personally invite you to the opening of the foundation. He held out an envelope and congratulate you on the upcoming wedding. Kirk told me. She accepted the invitation. Thanks. I'm glad that everything is working out for you. It's strange to realize that a man I've lived with for 20 years has become a real stranger. Not an enemy, not an ex-husband, but just another person going his own way. In the evening, when she and Matthew were sitting on the veranda watching the sunset, she told about James' visit. He's really changed, she mused. It seems that his pain was the beginning of a transformation. Matthew put his arm around her shoulders. Everyone has their own path to their present. Someone comes through loss, someone through gain. The main thing is that we are all moving forward. Olivia rested her head on his shoulder, inhaling the familiar scent, wood, pine needles, something subtly masculine. Do you know what I'm thinking? What is it? She asked, looking up at the pinkening sky. The fact that a real family is not a stamp in a passport or a common surname. These are people who choose each other every day. They choose to take care of, support, and love. Matthew kissed her temple. And I choose you. Today, tomorrow, always. The spring evening enveloped them in peace and quiet. Allison was playing somewhere in the house, a simple tune she had recently composed herself. Sophia sang softly, accompanied by the guitar. Irene's voice came from the kitchen, humming an old song from her youth. A new family is not based on blood, but on the choice of the heart. A new beginning, not denying the past, but building a bridge to the future on it. A new life. The one that Olivia hadn't even dreamed of 6 months ago, but which now seemed the only right thing to do. Happy new beginning to us, Matthew whispered, kissing her fingers where the wedding ring would soon shine. Happy new beginning, Olivia echoed, and in those words there was not only hope, but also confidence in herself, in him, in their shared tomorrow.